Okay, fantastic. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay, if you guys can see me okay. This is all going to be a little bit new. Okay, fantastic. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hello. Okay, there's so many people here. This is so great. Okay, fantastic. Wow. Okay, I have to stop looking at the monitor and stop looking at the chat and then. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for letting me know that everything is good. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the live office hours for the School of Sweet Georgia. This is the very first time we are doing it in this new location, the new studio, new office, new set. Everything is new. It's a little bit nerve-wracking today just because I'm trying to do it with a new setup, and we're going to see if I can look at the chat, manage the chat, and do all of the things all at the same time. So anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. This is all going to be brand new. Thank you. So basically what the live office hours is every month I try to come here and we do a live stream where I answer questions that have come up in these forums, in the discussion forums at the school. And if there are any questions that you guys have while you're on the call, while we're talking, please feel free
to pop that into the chat. And maybe the easiest way to do it is to preface it with the all caps, just say question, and then type your question. So that way when I scroll through, I can sort of see what you guys are saying. And yeah, it's so cool to see so many of you guys chatting in there. It's fantastic. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Now, if you guys can't stay for the whole thing, which I have noticed you guys were saying that you might not be able to stay for the whole thing, totally fine. These are recorded, and so I'll put these up on the School of Sweet Georgia, so they're in the archive. You can come back and watch them anytime. Leah really helps. She breaks it down into all the questions that are asked, and she adds little bookmarks, so you can just jump to the spot where you want to see. So there is all of that going on, and yeah, excited to do this. This is going to be cool today. So obviously I wanted to show you guys first what's in today's episode. Today's episode, I'm not going to do any slides because of this new setup. I want to see if the internet is going to hold up in this place or if it's all going to fall apart. But so that's why I'm not going to do too many slides or anything like that right now. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about this new studio space. If you saw our vlog from last Friday, that was shot in the new space here with the new big mirror loom. We also we've just shot Katrina's class, the Spinning Up a Level class, which just launched on the platform yesterday. So if you guys haven't popped over to see that, Katrina's new class is coming out now. It's actually 6 modules long. It's a very big chunk of content. And so we decided to break it up and publish it in sort of bursts of content. So it's going to come out every other week for the next 6 weeks. And so that allows you to have some time to like absorb the stuff that Katrina's talking about, maybe give you a little bit of time to do the exercises that she leads you through and things like that. So that is all good. Yes, Porch Sit and Knit is saying, I'm so excited for the new spinning class. Fantastic. Yeah, so Katrina's class has been really awesome. I filmed a little vlog about it, and the homework assignments that I'm doing right now, that's going to come out tomorrow as well. I really, really encourage you guys to do the homework. That's what the vlog is all about tomorrow. Basically here in this studio right now, it is just me, and in the next coming weeks, the rest of the studio is all going to move over. So our dye studio is coming over, our whole team is coming over, all the inventory is coming over. That's all happening in the next couple of weeks. So I'm hoping to share more about the rest of the studio space with you guys when that all actually happens. So yeah, next time we do this, there's going to be like people all over here. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about today, I have a couple of questions that I've sort of pulled from the forums and everything that we can talk about. But one of the things that I wanted to sort of remind you guys about is the idea of learning plans. So learning plans has been in our discussion forum since the very, very beginning. And so the idea is that basically you write out your own goals for what you want to learn, whatever it is. You just brain dump all the things that you want to learn. And we talk about goal setting quite often in the school, breaking down big projects into smaller projects, all of that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to sort of remind you guys that there's this section of the discussion forum called learning plans, where you can create your own thread that is your thread, and then you put in what your goals are, what your timeline might be, what it is you kind of want to learn, how you might go about doing that, maybe list out the projects that you're currently working on, all of that kind of stuff, and then choose a schedule to come back and repeatedly reflect on how your progress is going, like how are you doing with all of this. So it's really, really helpful. It's one of the key things that I believe makes a difference in being able to achieve anything, is you have to set your goals, but not just in your mind. You should write down your goals, and then on top of that, you should share your goals. So the fact that it's in the discussion forum allows you to see everybody else is kind of going to see those goals, and they can chime in, provide some encouragement for you, provide some support. And I also sort of encourage you guys to read each other's learning plans, because you can get a lot of inspiration from what other people are learning to do, because it could be something that you've never heard of before, something that just sounds interesting, intriguing, you might want to try as well. So there's a couple of links to the creating a learning plan post. We're going to post that here. And also I updated my own learning plan, so that is in there as well, so you guys can check that out. But I also wanted to in terms of looking at somebody's learning plan, it doesn't have to be this extensive, but I would encourage you to check out Rachel Gardner. She's a member on our school, and she's written a massive learning plan for herself. Yours doesn't need to be so long. You can see mine. You can see the latest post that I posted, which is basically just what am I doing with weaving, spinning, knitting, and dyeing right now. That's it. Just like a few of the projects that I'm working on. It's very short. Rachel's is very long, but you can look to hers and see if there's any inspiration. It's a place to put your thoughts and all of that kind of stuff. Yes. So one of the things that Rachel has been asking about is this idea of recommended reading. So she's working on her big giant learning plan, but also looking at, what kind of reading should we do? What would be really helpful? And it's actually amazing that right now on Instagram, there's 2 hashtags that you can follow. And one of them is called, hashtag is My Weaving Life in 7, the number 7 books. My Weaving Life in 7 books, and My Spinning Life in 7 books. And so it's kind of a hashtag that people are using to tag books that have been influential in their learning. And so what I want to do is I am going to be putting together a big giant post about all of the books, the recommended reading that we have. I have like book lists for the dyeing courses. So I've listed the books that I use and have recommended for dyeing, but I've never done that for spinning and weaving, I don't think. And so I wanted to share with you guys some of my book collection because I was mentioning, while Katrina came here to film, I was mentioning the book that was like the most influential book to me. And she's like, I've never heard of that. I was like, what? So this is the book that is, I think, the most influential book in my library. This book started everything. And this book is called The Twisted Sisters Sock Workbook. You can see it's a very skinny book. Like it's a tiny skinny book. But in here, it's just inspiration, pure inspiration. It gives you like a very broad overview of how to dye with acid dyes, how to dye fiber, and then how to spin that. And so each section is very short. So there's like a section on how to hold the superwash fiber so it doesn't fall apart, how to dye. This is the book that I used when I first learned how to dye. So there's like how to sprinkle dye, all of these kinds of things, and then how to spin it. And so this is one of the things that gave me so much inspiration, just seeing how different colors could be spun up. And you might be attracted to these colors or not, but either way, it's fun and exciting to see how these colors turned out. And so this is one of the books that was, absolutely one of the most influential books for me ever. And then at the end, there's all these instructions about how to knit socks and different ways of knitting socks with your hand spun or hand dyed yarn and things like that. So this book, if you can get a hold of this is a great skinny, easy little book. It's really funny because at the beginning of the book, there's this picture of the group of them, and they're the Twisted Sisters, and they're saying, who are the Twisted Sisters? And these are it's a group of women who love to spin together and dye together and knit together. And when I was reading this book, I was just starting out and I was like, oh, when will I have, a group of people that I can spin with and hang out with and everything? And it's neat to see this sort of progression of, getting into a craft and getting so excited about it. And then eventually, finding your tribe of people who will do this with you. I love this book. So this one. The other one that is super influential for me is obviously this one, Deb Menzies' book, Color and Spinning. This is a huge book. If you can get a copy of this book, this is amazing. This is, Deb does mostly color blending with hackles and combs, drum carders. She did a lot of color blending. So that kind of work is done in our Carding for Color class with Katrina. It covers a lot of similar ideas, taking different fiber colors, blending them together on a drum carder to make new colors. And so there's a lot of color theory in here, but there's also a lot of information about dyeing, specifically with acid dyes. She uses Saproset, which is also called Lanaset, which is also called Talana, which is something that we talk about as well. So she has photos of her workspace and how she does her dyeing in her own studio space, and tons of information on dyeing, and then tons of information on, how do you spin from a bat? How do you spin from this carded combed preparation? She was the first person that I learned this idea of combination plying, combination drafting from. So this book, if you can get a hold of it, is fantastic. I have no trouble with old books. I love old books. I think old books are fantastic. So Deb Menz. The other person that I'm a huge fan of is Sarah Lamb. This is a newer book. Sarah Lamb, I've talked about her a lot because she spins silk from just, a brick. She just spins plain old white silk fiber. I took a workshop with her at SOAR many, many, many years ago, and she talked about how she devotes 2 hours every morning to just sit and spin at her wheel. She spins all this silk yardage, and then she takes that yarn and then she dyes it with acid dyes and then uses all of that to weave her own kimonos. It's amazing. So this book is sort of like a culmination of a lot of the conversations or a lot of the tests that she's done with spinning different yarns and then how do they work up into different cloth. So this is very much like something that interests me and what I want to be doing. If I'm going to spin, I'm going to spin to weave with it. So this is sort of like along the lines of what I'm interested in. In terms of other spinning books that have been really, really influential, there's a couple of books here. These are older books. You might not be able to find these books. These are a little bit trickier. This one is called Spinning for Softness and Speed by Paula Simmons. And she writes in here about a technique of spinning long draw where you can spin without looking and you can spin with one hand. And the purpose of this is to spin really, really, really a ton of yardage very, very quickly. So if you're going to weave with your yarn, if you're going to do production spinning, this is kind of part of the reason why I bought it, because I thought I might become a production spinner many, many years ago. And so this is yeah, it's very, very interesting concept about being able to spin long draw and how to do it and all of this kind of stuff. So this is one. Paula Simmons, yeah, I was very lucky to meet her many, many, many years ago. I bought a drum carder from her husband, Patrick Green, and went out to their place in Chilliwack and visited, and she gave me an apple from her garden. I was very pleased about that. This one is also a big giant book. This is Alden Amos, the Big Book of Hand Spinning. This is a book, if you're learning about spinning, this one has tons of information about the technical aspects of spinning, like how a spinning wheel works, how a spindle works, how to measure grist, all of these kinds of things. This is it's like an encyclopedia, technical book. So this one is a good one. And then I have a book here, which is, I have showed this on the vlog before because it was in talking about the studio. The reason why I think we have this studio space now, and we have a different room for dyeing, and we have a different room for weaving, and we have a different room for yarn, and all of these things, I feel like it came from this book many, many years ago. I was inspired by this old book, and it was about setting up a studio space. And so I'll show it to you guys again. There's well, maybe you guys can't see it, but there's a floor plan in here of what it looks like to have a fiber art studio. And I just pored over these chapters for so long because I was dreaming about what it would be like to have a space to do your weaving, to do your spinning, all of this kind of stuff. And so this is, I feel like, the seed. It was planted the seed for what all of this has become. The other reason why I think that this book is really cool is this is the weaving and spinning and dyeing book by Rachel Brown. It's very, very complete. So it has tons of information about spinning, tons of information about weaving on different kinds of looms. It has a section about natural dyeing, and at the end it has a section about making a living at your craft. So this is one of the few books that talks about being able to make a life in what you make. So either selling retail, selling wholesale, selling at markets, how do you price things? Why would people buy from you? Like, it's all, it's one of the very few places where you can find this kind of information. So I found this is a phenomenal, wonderful old book. So those are mainly the spinning ones. Oh, there's also this one, Maggie Casey, Start Spinning. This is the book. I have for some reason 3 copies of the exact same book. So I'm going to give this to Leah here. But yeah, this is Maggie Casey. She is a spinning instructor who's the spinning instructor for Interweave. She is in all of the magazines teaching all of the demonstrations for such a long time. And so this book sort of encapsulates everything that you need to know to get started with spinning, like how to spin a singles, how to ply, how do different wheels work, all of this kind of stuff. So this is a really, really lovely book as well. Now, in terms of weaving, the most influential weaving books in my life, I think, started with this one. This is the first book that I ever got to do with weaving, and it's called Learning to Weave, Deb Chandler. This is the book that I actually buy and gift to anybody who's wanting to learn how to weave. And it has in here every instruction about warping your loom from back to front, from front to back, how it all works. Just leads you through very, very simple 4-shaft projects from the very beginning, and information about yarn management and all this kind of stuff. So this is a really handy book to have. It goes into like more complicated patterns, and I haven't even got to that point, but there's lots of stuff to work through with each one of these books. Yeah, I know. Katie's saying my Amazon cart just got pretty full. I used to have an Amazon book problem. I really love books. Another set of books that you probably can't get on Amazon is this set of books. These books are by Peggy Osterkamp. She's a weaver. She's got a blog, long running blog. And these 3 books have been immensely helpful. So they are all about very, very technical, very clear instructions for how to dress your loom, how to warp your loom, how to wind a warp so that it's just perfect, how to just everything is about perfect tension, getting everything right. And there's just so much information here. The other thing that's really, this is called Warping Your Loom and Tying on New Warps. So the idea of tying on to old warps, tying on to dummy warps, all of that stuff is in here. But there's a really important section in here that I find is really important, is that she has set charts. Maybe it's not in this one. It's one of these 3. She has set charts for all of the different kinds of yarn. So if you're using cotton, all of the different weights of cotton, and then she has a massive table of all the different sets that you could use for that kind of yarn. So if you want to make a super dense fabric for upholstery, then you would set it at this number. And if you want to make a super gauzy fabric for curtains, then you set it at a different number. And if you're doing plain weave or twill, she's just got all of this information out there. So those are a good series of books to get. Another book which is also very popular, I saw this on Instagram a lot with that hashtag, is this one called The Big Book of Weaving. This one has very detailed, very clear illustrations of how to dress your loom. This one does, I think, back to front. This is kind of like a Swedish tradition of weaving, and lots of very inspiring photos in here as well. Lots of nice projects. So this one is, it's a good one that you can get because it's current. It's very easy to get one. Yeah. This one is less current. This one's The New Key to Weaving. I've received a lot of these books as people have downsized their weaving stuff. So very often this book and maybe the Deb Chandler book and some other books, they just get destashed when people want to get rid of their weaving equipment. And so if you can't find it on Amazon or you can't find it on, I wouldn't go the eBay route where you spend a lot of money on rare books, because I feel like a lot of these books are sitting around and they are being destashed. You just have to kind of look for them a little bit. But this one is great, tells you just everything about everything. So all the different weave structures, and yeah, this book is quite dense. I read this one every night to go to sleep. Yeah. Oh, this one I should tell you. This one is right now, it's a printout, but you can get an actual hard copy of this book, but I bought the PDF version, and so that's why it's printed out. But this is Laura Fry's book, The Intentional Weaver, How to Weave Better. This comes as an actual book. But Laura Fry, she is a production weaver. She's a production weaver and instructor in BC here, and she's been teaching for the Olds College, the Master Weaver program, and yeah, she is somebody that I would love to learn from. She's done a video about weaving very efficiently. She's done that for interweave. And so this is her book about intentional weaving. This also kind of is like the next step, like to learn about her tips and tricks about how to weave in a production way, very efficient, very practical, very smart tips. So yeah, I'm going to write all of these books up because I think that it's nice to have reference for where to go when you need a lot of this knowledge. It's all here in these books. We just have to read them. Yeah, so we'll put those lists up and I'll link to all of these books. And if you guys have any other suggestions for books that I haven't mentioned that you think are fantastic, that you encourage people to get, please do. Yeah, let us know in the forums. And that would be really, really lovely. Yeah, used bookstores. Tons of people getting rid of spinning and weaving books. So sad. Now, there's another question on here on the forums from Elena, and she was asking, spinning for warp threads. She asks, does anyone know of good tutorials for spinning warp threads? Mostly I see, no, you can't do that successfully, comments. But I'm loving using the hand spun for weft, but my goal is to go all the way using only hand spun on some projects. And so, yes, absolutely. You can spin yarn for weaving. You can spin yarn for warp. It will be strong enough. It will be totally fine. There is a section as I was going through all of these things. So I was going through all these books. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Sarah Lamb's book, this is Spin to Weave. All of her warp yarn is hand spun because her warp yarn is that silk yarn. It's, I believe it's a 2-ply generally, and then she dyes it, and then she makes warp faced scarves and shawls and projects like that. So you can definitely spin warp for sure. This one, the book where I was talking about Paula Simmons spinning, like she's talking about spinning singles, like soft singles, and she uses that as warp as well. And she was saying that mill spun yarn has only been around for about 200 years or so, which means that everything prior to that time was hand spun, and that means that everything that weavers were weaving with was hand spun. And so it can be done. What she does with her soft singles, if she's putting it into cloth, is she does sizing. So sizing is something that you can mix up on your own, and you basically you can wet your yarn with the sizing, and it gives it more strength, and it makes it more resistant to abrasion as you're putting it onto the loom, as you're weaving with it. And then when you're done, you take it off the loom and you wash it, and the sizing all comes out. So it's basically like a little starch just to keep it all, secure. And then when you wash it, all of that sizing will come out, and then you have this wonderful, beautiful, fluffy piece of cloth. So there's that. So yes, definitely you can spin hand spun for weaving. And we're going to do more of that in 2021 because all the stuff that I'm spinning right now is going to be going onto the loom, and it's going to become weaving projects. And I know Katrina is also experimenting a lot with weaving with her hand spun. Rachel Smith is also doing the same. Diana Twiss has done a lot of weaving with her hand spun. And so what I'd like to do for 2021 is put together like a little bit of a panel or kind of like a gallery or some kind of thing where we kind of go around and see how different people are using their hand spun in their weaving, because everybody spins a little bit differently, everybody weaves a little bit differently, and it would be nice to see how everybody does it and how they all turn out. So if you are also weaving with hand spun, I encourage you to also chime in and let Elena know about that. The next question is about keeping your spindles safe. So this question is from Frances, and she's saying, I'm newish to spinning and I have found a lot of information about spindle spinning. What I haven't found much info on is how people protect their spindles that they're using. One of the things that attracted me to spindles was how small they were in comparison to a wheel, and they could be taken with you anywhere. However, in none of the places I have looked at, Spindle Info does mention how to carry them around with you. So I was wondering if people could share pictures of how they take their spindles and their fiber with them for a day out or even from room to room. Right now I have a plastic zip bag with some fiber and a small Turkish spindle. I have a supported spindle coming, and I would really like a better way of taking it around with me. Also a random thing, but I saw a picture of a supported spindle that had some kind of a plastic or rubber thing attached to the shafts, and then they had an end with a fiber pin on that. Do you need one of those to hold? Okay, so Francis is asking, how do you hold your spindle? How do you carry your spindle around with you? And so I do a similar thing where I can put a Turkish spindle in like a knitting bag surrounded with fiber, and I carry that around with me. There is a little picture in here in my handy dandy book in here. You can barely see it here, but yeah, it's from that Twisted Sisters book, and they're talking about how they just carry their spindle and their fiber in their backpack, and then they can take it with them wherever they go. If any of you guys follow Rebecca Mezoff, she's a tapestry weaver in, I believe she lives in Colorado. She's been doing a lot of hiking and camping and things like that this past summer, and all through her Instagram feed, she was talking about taking a spindle with her, carrying a spindle with her, and she just hike and spindle the whole way. It's pretty fantastic. So yeah, you can definitely carry it around with you. Katrina left some feedback as well about storing it in a Scotch container, you know, like the cylindrical cardboard container that comes with different, you know, bottles and things like that to keep the bottles safe. You can take those containers and use that for your spindles. For drop spindle, that would work really well. Those kinds of things to keep it safe and secure. Because I have, unfortunately, dinged some of the spindles that I have owned, and it's very, very sad. Also with the supported spindles, I think it's really you have to be really, really careful. They roll away because they're like sticks, but they roll away. And the other day I rolled away and it almost rolled off of the table, and the sharp pointy end of my supported spindle was so sharp and pointy I actually impaled my finger and it was bleeding. They're very, very sharp. So it would be very good to have something that could contain them very well. So what I have is I just use a plastic shoebox that you can get from Home Depot, and I keep all of my spindles in there, and I put hand woven cloth on the bottom to protect them, and it put some fiber in them to just kind of keep them separated from each other so that they don't bump against each other. But that is basically how I've been storing my spindles, and it allows me to carry them from room to room, and whenever I need to do a little bit of spindling, they are there. So yeah, I'd be very interested to see how you guys are doing that if you are carrying around your spindles. Now, Cheryl is asking another question about weaving samples. She says, I'm new to weaving. I have a 15-inch Cricut loom, and I was wondering what everyone uses to weave samples in order to determine how yarns interact with each other and avoid a lot of loom waste. And then she followed up by saying that she actually got the swatch maker that's made by Pearl and Loop. And the swatch maker looks like just a tiny little frame loom. It's like about this big. And it's got a series of different holes and a series of different slots. And so you can basically warp it up at different sets. So you could warp it up, I think it's at 8, 10, and 12 are the different options. So you could weave, you could like basically needle weave a small little swatch about this big, and then you wouldn't be using, you wouldn't have any loom waste with a situation like that. So that's very, very handy. But I actually think that even weaving on a Cricut loom, weaving on a rigid heddle loom is already a really good way to make samples. There's not a ton of loom waste on those looms already. So you could set it up, you know, just a very narrow kind of warp, and then you could just weave a bunch of different weft yarns, try a bunch of different sets. It's something that could be very, very easy to take the reed out and then reslay with a new reed and try different sets and things like that. Also, even just using a 4-shaft loom, like a 4-shaft table loom, is also good for making samples. In terms of what I'm doing for samples, I basically weave an entire scarf each time. And part of this is because I learned from one of the weavers locally here, Diana Sanderson. She talked about making very large samples. And so they weave entire scarves and then they wear them for several months. So Diana Sanderson has a studio on Granville Island called the Silk Weaving Studio, and they weave silk scarves which are then sold. So in order for them to do their sampling, it's not just a matter of doing set and figuring out if the cloth is nice, but they have to wear it. There's almost a quality control process where they are wearing the scarves and they live with it for a number of months to see how does the yarn do? Does it pill? Is this a good balance of set, all of these kinds of things. So it's a lot of testing in place with that sample. So it's not just about weaving a little piece of cloth, but it's actually about weaving something that you will try out and see how it does. So I encourage you to give that a try too. Like I'm weaving tons of scarves, and all of my scarves are basically samples for what future scarves will become. And then the last question here that I have from Cheryl is a question about variegated yarn in weaving. She says, for a project, I have dark yarn, semi-solid yarn, and a lighter variegated yarn. Which would look better as my warp and which one as my weft? And so for this question, I brought a couple of samples to show you. I like the look of variegated yarns in the warp, because I feel like the variegation, the blotchiness of the color gets distributed and spread out very nicely along a long piece of cloth. If you use a variegated yarn in the weft, then you might end up with a similar situation as to when you're knitting socks with hand-painted yarn. You might get a bit more pooling, might get a little bit more streaking. And so if you don't mind that, a lot of people like that look. If you don't mind that, then absolutely that's a good thing to do. But I like that sort of better mixed and blended look to things. So this is a scarf that is made with a variegated hand-painted color, and that I put into the warp, you can see. And then I used a kind of a light solid colored weft for this. And then you can see down here, there's another section here where I used a darker colored weft. So the lighter colored weft was picking up sort of the peachy, the lighter grapefruit, peachy kind of tones in that same variegated yarn. And then at the bottom, I was using sort of a darker, more coral, more red sort of color to also pick up the darker tones. So you can see the difference in using a lighter or a darker color with that variegated hand-dyed color. So obviously this is all entirely up to you. You could definitely do a dark colored, solid colored warp and then use this other color as the weft. And then you might get sort of like an effect that's this, but vertical. And then you have to kind of imagine that your fringe would all be a dark color, a dark solid color. So lots of different ways to visualize this. One of the things that I'm going to be doing, as I said, I was going to be doing the hand spun into hand weaving project. So I have spun 2 yarns that are identical. So both yarns have been spun with fractal spinning technique. And then I'm going to take one of those skeins and I'm going to put that into the warp of a scarf. And then I'm going to take the other one and put it into the weft of a scarf. And then I'm going to compare the 2 different scarves and see how that all looks. A couple more samples here. This is another sample. I recently got a serger, so I was able to tidy up all the ends of my samples here. But the warp yarn in this case is another variegated, hand-dyed, hand-painted sort of colorway. And then at the top, I'm using a very, very fine weft. It's a silk weft, so it creates a very, very light effect. The second weft down here, this blue one, the turquoisey kind of one, this one is our silk fog, which is silk and mohair, so it's a little bit more fuzzy, it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit more like fingering DK weight, and so that creates quite a different effect. And at the bottom, I used the same hand-painted yarn as in the warp. I put that also in the weft, and so it produces more of like a plaid kind of pattern. There's a bit of more of a plaid pattern. You can see that happening more in something like this. So that is where the hand-painted color is in both the warp and the weft, so you get that effect. And then these ones are the ones where you're using a dark weft and a hand-painted warp. So this is one of the projects that we did for the Rigid Heddle class, the Rigid Heddle Weaving Basics class. And so this was just done on the Rigid Heddle. I think I did it on the 16-inch sample it loom, the Rigid Heddle loom from Ashford. And this is basically a sample, right? So this is, I just put on one kind of a warp with the hand-painted color and then trying a bunch of different weft colors to see what's happening with each. And then with this, I could basically pull out my favorite section and then make an entire scarf out of just that project. And so this becomes my sample. But I would love to see if you guys have, I know many of you guys are doing much more weaving projects right now. So if you have more weaving projects and photos that you can share, it would be great to be able to see more examples of how different yarns work up and how they blend. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about creating sort of like a portfolio feature for the school where people can post more of their work. I know that Ravelry exists, but that's mostly for knitting projects. But to be able to do something like that for weaving projects would be really great, so that we could see, you know, like what set did you use, what yarn did you use, what loom did you use, what weave structure did you use, and so all of that could be very, very helpful for people who are learning or people who need project ideas and things like that. So that is the questions that I have from the forums today. So one last thing about the forums is it just got updated maybe a week or so ago with just there's a tiny little facelift to the forums, but the tiny facelift was designed so that way it would be easier to use on a mobile device. So if you're surfing the forum from your phone, then it should be easier to click on everything, because everything before was really, really tiny. All the words and all the links were kind of on the small side. So now everything should be a little bit easier to use if you are on there. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. If you have more questions, please feel free to pop those into the discussion here. And let me know. Let me see. I'm gonna just check. Easier to use if you. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have more questions, please feel free. I see. Those into the discussion. Because okay, I'm gonna check the chat just to make sure. Yes, so Grace has been saying, I've been spinning and weaving, hand spun, and then sewing my own clothes. So that is fantastic. Yes. I take the Red Tower saying, I take my spindle and fiber to bazaars and farmers markets and get people curious, and it's fun to see their interests. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, one of these days we can all get together and spin together in person. That would be wonderful. Fantastic. So thank you guys for being here today. If you have any feedback about any of the things that we're doing here, anything that you'd like to see for 2021, I am right now in the process of planning the content for next year. So I am open to suggestions and ideas and anything that you guys want to let me know. You feel free to email me. Oh, here, I think I have a slide for that. So you can find our contact information here. You can find our Instagram, you can find our websites, and you can always email me you can email me, but you can also find me on the discussion forums at the School of SweetGeorgia and leave your questions there. So that's basically it for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you guys in the next one. All right, bye for now.